Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Emergency Program Executive Committee meeting. I would like to acknowledge that we are conducting this meeting on unceded traditional territories of Hippichesset First Nation and Tisha First Nation, and we're grateful for that fact. Notice to attendees and delegates, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube, on the Regional District website. Attendees can register to watch on Zoom. Questions can be emailed to ACRD at responses@acrd.bc.ca. I'd like to welcome everyone here in the meeting. Because we're conducting the meeting in a hybrid format, I will go on the table first and introduce those online. And I will start to my right.
Good afternoon, Cindy Solda, City of Port Alberni, City Council.
Aklama, good afternoon. My name's Penny Cody, ACRD Sprout Lake Rep.
Good afternoon, Winna Brown from Adrian Brown Group.
And good afternoon, John Reynolds from Adrian Brown Group.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bob Beckett, Area A, Banfield, ACRD.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Freely, Protective Services Manager with the ACRD.
Afternoon, Mike Fox, City of Port Alberni.
Good afternoon. I'm Daniel Sayam, the CAO for the ACRD.
Good afternoon, Charlie Stewart, Regional Fire Services Manager.
Hello, Kristen Cardonahue, Administrative Assistant for the ACRD.
Thank you. Now we'll go online. Director Siga.
Rita Siga, Director for Area C, Long Beach.
Thank you. And Director Boyko.
Fred Boyko, Electoral Area Director for Beaufort.
Thank you. And I am Mike Sparrow. I'm Electoral Area Director for Cherry Creek, and I am your chair today. I'd like to have the approval of the agenda. Is there any additions from the corporate office? No. Any additions from board? No. Can I get an approval of the agenda? Moved by Cindy Solda, Councilor Solda, seconded by Director Cote. Thank you. All those in favor? Great. Opposed? Passed. Thank you. Any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none. We'll go on to item 4, minutes. Emergency Program Executive Committee meeting held May 15th, 2025. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none. Can I get a motion to accept?
Move to adopt.
Move to adopt. Right, Director. Councilor Solda, seconded by Director Siga. Thank you. All those in favor? And that is carried. Presentations. We have presentations from John Reynolds, Principal, Juanina, Adria Brown, Managing Director, Adria Brown Group, Emergency Communication and Public Notification Plan. Thank you. And there is no time limit, you'll see, so it's all yours.
Thank you so much and good afternoon, everyone. We really appreciate your time and it's wonderful to be back here again. As said, I'm Winna Brown from Adrian Brown Group, Inc. and I'm joined today by my colleague, ABG Principal John Reynolds. And today we're very pleased to be providing an update on the ACRD's Emergency Communication and Public Notification Plan project. And we'll provide a brief orientation to the system. We'll summarize the plan and communication tools. And we'll take a look at what's already changed in practice and outline practical next steps to move the system forward. So, of course, before we begin, we want to acknowledge that emergency preparedness and response and public information in the ACRD take place on the homelands of many First Nations who have cared for these lands and waters since time immemorial. We want to specifically thank on this project for their involvement and leadership to Shot First Nation and Hippichesset First Nation. We're very grateful for their support and their leadership on this project. We also want to thank the staff from the city and the ACRD for their participation, emergency program leadership, our first responders, elected representatives from the ACRD and the city of Port Alberni, and all the electoral regions were also represented, as well as local partner agencies and organizations, all of whom contributed their time, their expertise, their experiences, and helped provide candid feedback throughout the duration of this project, and really contributed towards the successful outcome of the plan and the various materials. John.
Thanks, Winna. So as you well became aware this summer, public expectations during emergency are immediate and they're multi-channel, and events cross government lines. The goal is to build a predictable, coordinated approach so that people know who is leading, where to look for updates, and what to do. This project has been about building a reliable communication system that protects people, supports the unified public message, and maintains trust from first notification through response and recovery. So what we delivered was an emergency program that now has a complete strategic emergency communications plan, companion standard operating procedures, resource guides, ready-to-use public messaging templates, including social media graphics, staged media materials, public updates, trauma-informed messaging, channels guidance, messages, and operational checklists for the information officer function. In addition to that, we now have standalone emergency communications plans and tools. They've been developed for the Sechot First Nation and Huipachesek First Nation as well. When such an incident crosses governments, messaging can be coordinated early while each nation continues to speak in its own voice and on its own authority.
Thanks, John. So what's already changed? So these tools, I think we can all agree, were tested a little sooner than we expected this summer through the various emergencies that you faced and responded to in the region. So under real pressure, wildfire activity, we saw evacuation-related messaging, and a tsunami advisory. So the program began applying already the new approach, declaring who was leading on what type of messaging, issuing clearer and more frequent updates, and coordinating messages across governments. Public demand for timely, reliable information also grew, and we saw rapid growth of the program's social channels, for example. Collectively, these incidents highlighted three strengths the program seeks to institutionalize. Those are faster activation signals and clearer public updates, visible cross-jurisdiction coordination, including with First Nations, and consistent trauma-informed messaging across channels that points back to a single source of truth. And those activations also showed us what to keep strengthening: depth in training communicators, direct access and backups to systems, tools, the website, alerting tools, procedures, a predictable, reliable update cadence, and continued joint public information with our various First Nations. In terms of roles and structures, effective communications really depends on clearly defined roles, consistent reporting lines, strong relationships within the EOC structure. The Emergency Communication and Public Notification Plan outlines the formal responsibilities of the information function and the working relationships with the key positions in the Incident Command System, or ICS is the acronym. These roles and structures align with the legislation. So the BC Emergency Management System, BCEMS is the acronym, the ACRD's own Emergency and Disaster Management Plan, and ICS, the Incident Command System principles governing public information, as well as the emergency program's own operational practices and the local regional context. Day-to-day emergency program leadership sits with the Protective Services Manager, which is in the ACRD, along with the CAOs from both the region and the city. And they're responsible for maintaining the plan and the resources and building the systems and ensuring that there's capacity for the function within the response. During an activation, it is the information officer who leads communications. So that individual drafts and coordinates public updates and posts them through approved channels. It's the EOC director who approves those releases and is responsible for briefing elected officials. And those elected officials and senior leaders are that once they're briefed, they're helpful in carrying approved messages forward and amplifying those to their audiences. John.
Thanks, Wyndham. So what the public should expect. The plan aligns communications with activation levels, whether that be monitoring mode, partial activation, or full activation. So when the EOC is partially or fully activated, the information officer functions is automatically activated and co-located in the EOC. It's not done off the side of anybody's desk anymore. Coordinating the timing, accuracy, and message discipline with operations planning and the incident commander. Anytime the EOC is activated, either partially or fully, elected officials and the public should be informed through a clear notice of activations. That notice will identify who is leading, where the updates will appear, and on what regular predictable cadence they will. The ACRD's plan is both proactive, multi-channel, consistent, clear messaging, delivered under recognizable emergency program identity, so people can get timely direction and steady reassurance without having to chase information across the web. In collaboration with the First Nations, both, as we mentioned, both Sashot and Huipachesik First Nations each now have their own emergency communications plan. The emergency program is written to work alongside both those nation-specific plans, supporting both early contact and coordinated messaging, while recognizing that each nation speaks for its own lands. This approach respects sovereignty, reduces confusion for the public, and helps everyone avoid information conflict in real time. That's a real benefit from extending this approach to other nations and Indigenous governments in the region where they're invited to do so, as illustrated this summer, obviously with the Bamfield issue and Hawaii being involved. So for elected officials, how you can help. Support and amplify approved public messaging to maintain trust and prevent confusion. Direct media requests and public statements through the EOC director or the public policy group liaison if one is assigned, so there's one clear public voice. And share what you're hearing from the community through those channels so emerging questions can be picked up quickly. And there's one thing I could implore the elected officials was please do not amplify unofficial messaging. It just creates more confusion in the environment.
Thanks, John. So what happens next? Next steps. So our final report, which I believe the committee has received a copy of, speaks to this in more detail, but essentially some of the key points are keep focusing on people and depth. So confirm primary information officer, assistant information officers, and trained qualified backups. And keep short refreshers going, both of the materials, and ensure they're up to date on their formal ICS or Justice Institute credentials. Systems and continuity. I think it's really important to maintain a shared online workspace for the information officer function so that we're not reliant solely on one individual who might have documents saved on their personal drive or in their email. In true ICS form, any individual who's qualified in the public information officer role ought to be able to come in to the position and assume responsibilities at any point during an incident. Access and redundancy. So finish documenting who can publish on the web, social, and make sure there are MOUs or protocols in place, whether that be through a password keeper or an MOU is another very viable mechanism to ensure that people know where to get the proper credentials for the social channels or how to post on the website, for example. Cadence and alerting. So we've seen a lot of really good progress in this, and we'd like to see the emergency program maintain a regular cadence in publishing information updates for the public and for elected officials so that you know predictably when you're going to get the next update. And that's stated very publicly and upfront so that we're transparent about when the public can expect the next update. And we did see good progress on that. And I think there's opportunity to keep that momentum going. And also to ensure that those steps become ingrained and they become routine and practiced. With respect to public presence and education, I think continuing to build awareness and preparedness messaging is incredibly important. And always interest in those things is heightened after a series of emergencies. So seize the moment and keep that momentum going with your publics. And continue, as we discussed when we met with you a few months back, is continue to strengthen and clarify the program's identity and social and web channels. And I think there's really room to improve that, particularly with respect to the website. And also posting a plain language summary of the plan, I think would be very helpful to the public so that they know what to expect during an emergency and they have that information in advance of one occurring. And of course, continue to work with First Nations and other agencies and governments, as you already do, continuing to build early coordination across governments. John.
So just to wrap up, the groundwork is in place, already proving useful. The focus now is on keeping the system warm, people, access, cadence, public education, and government-to-government coordination, so the communication stays trusted over time and develops. And so thank you for your leadership and support today. If any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer.
Thank you for your report. Does anybody have any questions? No, we can go back on, we can take down this, we can see people online. Thank you. And we'll go with Director Silva.
Just a quick thing. As a policymaker, it's really boring because I want to be on ground zero, right? And because normally it's just the mayor and the CAO that are involved, and we're at the extreme. I have been invited one time because we were at the extreme at one point in the past years. So otherwise, I would rather be there and help people going through the warming centers and different centers. And it would be great that, and if you're called out, then you get called out to do whatever you have to do at the policy making level. So just wanted to point that out. It's really hard. And sometimes the public knows before we do. And although in this case, it wasn't as bad as it has been for communication. So, and then you get, as policymakers, we get, or council, we get a lot of calls saying what's going on. I'm not sure. I redirect to where they have to go. But it's really frustrating. Just wanted to point that out to everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Director Boyko.
Thank you very much, Chair. My main concern is having a consistent message across everything at the same time. So I think on the second slide there, he talked about the public doesn't care what level of government it is. It's just that government is government. So when the ACRD changes something, evacuation alert road doesn't really matter. Wildfire BC, Drive BC, ACRD messaging, ACRD Facebook, ACRD Twitter, all have to change at the same time. And if there's any discrepancies in that, which there were many in the past summer, people get on Facebook and start freaking out. Well, this says this and this says this, and it creates more confusion than what it actually is trying to send out. And I know there's different levels of provincial and everything else, but the public doesn't care. All they want is a consistent message across all things. So they're expecting the ACRD emergency, wildfire, everybody else to do the same thing at the same time. So we need to work on that, because to say that we're the trusted name, if we're not consistent, the public loses trust very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
So I can speak a little bit to that. Thank you for the question. I think that's extremely important in emergency communications. And the term I would use to apply to that is cascading information. And so that is particularly when you have multiple jurisdictions, many different EOCs that might be activated at the same time. For example, ACRD, you may have your EOC activated, BC Wildfire may be doing the same, Tahltan First Nation or Hubichet First Nation may also have theirs activated. So that is when a construct that is used frequently in the incident command system, it's called a joint information system or a joint information center. We address that in the plan. We have proposed a standard operating procedure for that. Obviously, that requires collaboration across your various agencies and jurisdictions or governments, but that is a very effective way of ensuring you have the mechanisms in place both to gather and verify information, but also then to cascade it and time the publication. And that doesn't have to be a physical space. It can also be a virtual space that can happen online. It can happen through a Teams meeting or a Teams chat, depending on the nature of the emergency. But it is an extremely effective mechanism for ensuring that information is systematically and effectively cascaded in a timely fashion.
No, that's good to hear just as a follow-up. And if there is a plan in place to improve that moving forward, I would say that would be the most important thing for us to work on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Any more questions? Director Beckett.
Just as a follow-up to the last couple of comments with respect to communication, and having lived the event in Bamfield over the summer, and I've said it before, there were things that went really, really well, including the work of the ACRD staff at the EOC, but there were also areas that we could improve upon, and communications is one of them. And Daniel and Karen both know my thoughts about the challenges that we saw, and certainly complicated by the fact, as you've alluded to, that there are many parties at play here, that it wasn't simply the EOC and the folks responsible for the dissemination of communication from the EOC. It was dependent on wildfire, MOT. I can go on and on. But where I'm coming to with respect to the plan, I think it would be really beneficial if ACRD staff, including the ESS team in Bamfield, myself, who was relatively active during the fire, critique the communication. What went well and what needs to be improved upon, involving those agencies that we were working with and continue to work with, because even right up until early this week, we're still having problems with Google Map, Drive BC, et cetera, et cetera. So while putting a plan together would be great, actually using relatively real-time recent event to identify what didn't go well would allow us to build that into a communications planning framework. So, again, I'm so grateful for everyone's efforts, but there is room for improvement. And I think the only way to do that is to be transparent with respect to critiquing that aspect of the event.
Through the chair. So how I would respond to that, I believe, is to say that the emergency communications and the whole emergency management cycle is one of improvement. So you always have to go through, you plan, you prepare, then you actually are activated, you get to you use those skills in an actual emergency, and then you have to assess and exactly go through that after action reporting process where you do look critically at what things worked well, what things did not work as well as expected perhaps, or what needs refinement. And then you make the changes to your planning or your documentation, and you continue that cycle never ends. So there will always be learnings in an emergency. I think the other comment I would make is that emergency communications, you will see this across the country. Communications almost always the very first thing that is critiqued by the public because it is what they so desperately need and want. And so putting even small measures in place, like a notification of activation, like publicly posting, EOC is activated. We're monitoring the situation closely, or we're fully activated. And once you build those processes into your routine, it will only help you when time comes. But the after action reporting, to get back to your original question, is extremely important.
And as a response, thank you very much for that. It was interesting that there was many frustrated messages sent my way, but the one that really resonated with me was, we don't care if there's nothing new today. Just let us know there's nothing new today. Interesting. Something as simple as that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would echo that through the chair. To say yes, I totally agree with that. And that's why one of the constructs we have tried to embed in the plan is you issue updates at regular times. You don't always know, or when information might change and people need to take actions or make decisions to protect their families or themselves. But you always should end a communique with when they can expect the next one. And if you do not have an update, which sometimes an emergency will happen, is information is delayed for various very bona fide reasons on the front line. And then you can just let people know that. It's quite simple. Or if there's nothing, you can say there's no change. We'll have an update for you at 9 a.m. rather than 7 a.m., whatever the difference might be. But letting people know that you're there, you're listening, and you're responding, and when they can expect updates, or if the situation should change, that you will be on top of it.
Okay, thank you for that. Actually, I have a little blurb I made up about communication. I'll read it out. So, of all the places I work, the first thing it breaks down is communication. Effective communication is evaluated by the receiver, not the sender. In order to be effective communication, it has been a format the receiver wants, like apps, news outlets. It has to be in a way the receiver understands, liberal comprehensions, paper versions, radio, whatever it happens to be. It has to answer the question the receiver wants answered. In a time frame the receiver wants, hourly, daily, monthly, whether or not they will be affected by the incident that is before them, how the incident affects them mentally, financially, and how to alleviate the concerns that they have. The failure to do any one of these objectives is a failure of communication. And that's why the communications fail first, is because we fail at one of these things. So that's what the reason we have the communication issues. And I will probably delve into that a little further down we do, but I think I have Councillor Solda, and then I have Director Cote.
Yeah, just a quick T-Shot. Actually, I want to talk about T-Shot. T-Shot actually has a really great communication thing. I noticed when they were having issues with their flooding and stuff like that, they would come on, they'd put a time, and this is communication, this is the date and the time, and then when you went down maybe 2 days later, a new communication would come on and it would have the time. So okay, that's the date, the time, okay, that's an old one, and now we've got the new one. I thought that was really, really good. I thought they did really well on their communication on whatever issue they were having. The other thing too is, did the team not sit down after the fire and have this didn't work at all? I assumed in other emergencies we would sit down and have a debrief. Thank you for that. So, because that to me, that is really important because you can only learn by your mistakes or you learn what really worked. So,
Yeah, through the chair. I just want to clarify any misconceptions that we're not here to debrief on the Underwood fire. We're here for the plan. But that said, yes, we did and we do have debriefs. So we do typically have debriefs, and we did have a debrief. Everything else that comes out of it is really next steps for improvement. I think the challenge with this one is we scheduled a debrief nonetheless, and that has occurred, but it's not the last debrief because we're still not clear of everything yet. And even though we've handed off a number of different things, so right now I think the biggest communication piece is through the Ministry of Transportation. They now control that 1.5 kilometers. And really what we're trying not to do is add communications around theirs. So when they communicate, we try and amplify, and whether that's successful or not, what we don't want to do is step in and start explaining on their behalf, because it creates more chaos. And so I think some of the comments that we're experiencing right now with the closures or lack thereof, depending on weather and rain, we're working with the ministry to help them figure that out, but we're doing our best not to step into that role of now being the prime communicator, because it's not a jurisdiction, it's not our weather station, it's not us monitoring. And so that's where we have to identify those distinctions. The ongoing or the subsequent debriefs that will occur after the recovery phase is something that we're going to come back and do, and probably follow up with the Banfield community, right? Like, it's not a great time to debrief now with more community-based organizations because they're still in it. But we have debriefed with the core EOC, and because they've moved on, and we're hoping to send out thank yous to all the volunteers and agencies that helped out. At least we're preparing all of that. So I think, like Luna said, it's always ongoing. We're always seeking to improve. I think the other interesting thing to flag is the fact that when you think of what is the most efficient route to getting a message out, it's usually the shortest path. And even though you can achieve that through an EOC, I think what we often see in our region is when we value, which we do, and we execute, which we have, collaboration, it is not the most efficient path. Because to actually collaborate in the moment, even though you have all the training, if you're going to recognize the jurisdiction of other agencies, First Nations, other local governments, BC Hydro, if you recognize their agency and their authority, then you are constantly going back and forth. And it's not like 2 or 3 groups. You're talking about 14, 15 agencies back and forth, going through, pulling it together, and then going in step. If any one of those 14 or 15 agencies goes out of step, all of us wear the egg on our face. And whoever it is that picks up the message from the public first goes, hurrah for this agency for telling me first. Well, it's not really a win, right? Like, it might be a temporary high five, but it really is, it's a loss for everyone, because everyone loses in the credibility of all these peer agencies, of which in an emergency, we happen to be the lead. That's just the structure we have. But when we look at something like COVID, right, it was very confusing during those times. And it took a while for local government to actually follow in step and amplify the provincial message. Some actually preferred to go against it, which wasn't necessarily helpful. Big debate around that still going on in the court cases. But when you talk about collaboration around an emergency, what's important to understand is who's the lead, and how are they collaborating? How are decisions being made effectively? And then following in a disciplined way, the amplification of those messages from the lead agency. Wildfire was the case for a while. Now it's MOT. That really is the lead agency for what we're doing. And all we're now doing is amplifying. And so we will always have a different role that shifts. And when we debrief, it's important to talk about what role we had in the moment and whether or not the expectation of the receiving public understood what our role in the moment was and how we did in that lens. And so, it's an ongoing dialogue. It's fascinating. And I think for the many staff, that were in the OC and through the elected officials that were part of it. It's one of those things that is it's important to be sensitive, and it's at the same time to have thick skin, because some of the messages aren't necessarily targeted to the right individual. But if, as local government, because we're the first level that people have access to, really, as you're buying your milk and butter or buying gas, we tend to receive it all. And so it's to distill that and share it in a good way. But I think the plan achieves that. And I think the next step around the plan, if it's approved and if the board wants to implement it, really comes down to a 2026 training. And the best thing we can do to make collaboration more efficient is the training and practice with the groups that we know we're going to be back in a room with when the next emergency occurs.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that, Director Cote.
Thank you. I have a few questions that are just ringing out to me. Number one is, why is there no First Nations here at this table when there's part of their proposed emergency communications public notification plan, and we're supposed to work with them? So why aren't they here? Next question is, we're talking the city of Port Alberni and the Valley, Banfield and Anakla, but not Long Beach. So does that not cover Long Beach as well? And First Nations on the West Coast, where's Tofino and Ucluelet when we're talking communications like this? Because it's not just the Valley that we're responsible for. So I'm kind of concerned that it's pretty limited here. I think that as a local official, I've been through the Dog Mountain fire. We've come a long way from that because there was a lot of deficiencies when that happened. There was no communications at the time. I reached out myself to Fire Command in Parksville and made a relationship with one of the people in communications there and got the updates directly, because it wasn't coming through the regional district. We've made a lot of changes since then. Good changes, really good changes. Working with the community, I think, is really important when we go forward here. So I don't really see anywhere for a position. How does the community communicate with emergency planning here and communications? Because they're on the ground in a lot of situations where they see the fire jump, or they see an incident. It's like, oh, it was an earthquake, the water line's busted here. Or like, where do they call? Like, I think that we need to publicize that this is the process and this is who you contact. I'm getting calls right now because of Cathedral Grove, and people absolutely terrified that someone's going to die. There was someone caught me yesterday at the grocery market saying they watched a head-on in the Grove because somebody got frustrated and tried to pass, and there was an accident. So where do they send that information? I said, write the regional district a letter, please, and address it to the board so that we all see it and it gets public. Because I can't tell you how many times I'm hearing from people about that situation. That to me is a crisis that is happening before it happens. And people have nowhere to communicate that to. So I don't know if that could be part of this communications. I don't know if this communications should only be for when there is a crisis, or if we can mitigate something happening, get that information out and start working on solutions. And I think one of the first solutions here is identifying who this is for and why the First Nations not here. Thank you.
So the First Nations aren't part of this executive group, and this is a meeting of the executive, and so we're following the structure under our terms of reference, which is the regional district partnered with with the city. And that's why, in terms of format, this is a standing meeting of our executive group. The Touchot and Hubachesit both have their own communications plan that was developed in step with us. And so they're receiving their plans as per their wishes with their elected groups. And so the collaboration between our plans occurs between our organizations upon activation, and that was the overall intention, right? So it's that recognition of their sovereignty over their plan and over their territory. With regard to communications outside, like this is really, we're focusing on us, on our programs. Veda's here for Area C. We have we're covering that area, but it's to recognize we don't run Tofino program. We don't want to run Ucluelas program. Just like we don't run a Hausitz or Lauquiots or Huayets program, right? So it's that, and that's where the collaboration is complex, depending where the emergency is and where the impacts are. It would be great to think that at some point in time, we would have a structure of an approved joint EOC, but we're not there yet. And I think what needs to happen over time is we're going to continue building our individual programs and collaborating until which time our communities are comfortable in the same way that the city and the ACRD was comfortable, where we say, okay, let's just do this together, right? Like what I love about our program is when I'm at the end of my rope or vice versa for Mike, it's like we usually connect with one another, but we're usually in step saying, hey, okay, you know what, you've been on too long, in for the next one. And so interagency integration builds capacity and allows us to run for longer. And that's what we saw between the ACRD and the city. And I think that ought to be celebrated. You don't see it happening very often. You don't see it happening well very often. And I would say this one worked really well. Now I'm going off the plan and into this emergency, but that's my view, which I'm sure can be debated, but I've been to enough emergencies to quantify my response. In terms of things like ongoing concerns that come up, like Cathedral Grove, really important to redirect back to the Ministry of Transportation, as it really is their concern. I know that can be frustrating because it seems to fall into an abyss sometimes, but we can channel there, we can receive things, but it's also in the regional district of Nanaimo. And so we have to make sure that we're, again, coordinating with the right agency, where if we're going to be taking action locally to push on provincial motion on it, I think it's important that we collaborate with our counterparts whose jurisdiction we're operating in as well. I mean, we feel the pinch because everyone in the valley, in the ACRD, will drive through Cathedral Grove at some point in a week, and we'll see what's going on. And I don't think Nanaimo talks a lot about it because Nanaimo doesn't drive through that often, even though technically the RDN should be weighing into this water. So it's in an emergency, what we're talking about the structure we put in place for an emergency. Outside of emergency, if we were to duplicate the resource level commitments, I think we would have some very serious budget discussions. It's to bear in mind that regionally we have one person assigned to communications that supports 59 services. And so they are stretched very thin. We have to pick and choose where communications is assigned. When we're in an EOC, we're 2, 3, 4 people deep. And if anything, what we've learned is we could probably double that easily just to keep up with the request for communication. So it's labor intensive to do well. It takes training. And I think an emergency is staffed and funded differently than day to day.
Thank you. I agree. We're quite limited with what we can do and approaches, because when we're dealing with provincial agencies like Ministry of Transportation, who come to our board and say that they're going to do nothing about a plan that they had started looking at a number of years ago, and it's like now it's like, no, we're just not going to do anything. That is really unacceptable when they're coming to our board and doing that. I think that's quite off topic right here, but I'm very frustrated by the response from Ministry of Transportation and how we're going to deal with that. I think a big part of communications is lobbying the province and other jurisdictions like Nanaimo Regional District. I think we need to communicate to them that our frustration, it's affecting everything in the valley and the west coast. Emergency access, like for whatever crisis that's happening here, we're quite left out in the cold, and nobody seems to be stepping up from provincial agencies. So I don't know how we could put something into the communications and notification where we could say, you know, maybe we need a petition or something, you know, saying that we need more support from the province on all of this. You're mentioning that we don't have enough staff. Well, maybe the province should start stepping up and giving us some support. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any more questions? That would be my turn. Okay. Yeah, you know what's coming. Time to take notes. So yeah, we had the Underwood fire going there on August 11th. We started through, and with the communication plan, the way it works is you go through the EOC. They're the point. They're the one that drive the information, and we all sort of sit back and wait for the drive. This is where I have the problems. One of the problems was in my area, Cherry Creek, which is north of the city, east of the city, and south of the city too. There was an evacuation order for houses south of the city. Somehow that got onto the media pages and became a Cherry Creek evacuation. Now, I know instant command systems and I know BSerms, so I sat back and I waited. And I waited because under BSerms and ICS, you wait until the EOC gives you direction. I didn't get direction. What I got was people out there on social media figuring it out for themselves because I was waiting for direction. And that is the problem. I could have stepped in, and I will next time step in and correct their communication system so they know what part was being evacuated and what part wasn't being evacuated. So people in the north of Cherry Creek will not start packing up their houses, start leaving because it was changed from where it was, the Cherry Creek electoral area to a Cherry Creek area. The word electoral got missed on the news, and I think it was CBC News actually. So that really caused a lot of confusion, and I sat back and I waited because that's the way the system works, and that's a big fault. The second big fault I have is with the Buoyant Alert system. Buoyant Alert system sends up information to certain areas for certain people on certain things, in which case was moving out of your houses on Franklin River Road. As their rep, I got no notification. So we're sitting in a room like this, and all of a sudden people's phones start going off, and they start getting notifications. And they're asking me what's going on. Guess who doesn't get the notification? I'm not in that right area to get that notification. The EOC has not given me any information to put forward before they sent out that information. So here I am sitting there trying to follow the EOC, trying to follow the command system, and knowing I shouldn't answer when I should answer. And that is a failure of this plan, as it's written right now, is if you're an EA director, you will be left out in the cold. It says it's for the ACRD, the city, TSHAP, Upachesson. If you're inside the zone and you are in the alert system, you will get a notification. But if you're not in the zone, you will not get notified, you will not be told, and you'll be left out in the cold. And I had directors reaching out to me, trying to help me, but I had nothing to offer them because I had no notifications. The only ones I got were the same ones every director got. At the time they got them. Even though I was the only area that had houses that were evacuated, people moved out and displaced. I have people phoning me about mental health issues. Again, where do I direct them to? I don't. I asked before day one, before the EOC was activated for mental health issues. This is our third wildfire in 2 years. Mental health didn't come until day 7. So this plan needs to be modified because right now it's failing. Thank you.
So a couple of things, and again, we're debriefing on the Mount Underwood, but I'll touch on one of the challenges with communication is following, like, if CBC puts out misinformation, and so we're well aware of the Cherry Creek element, and I recall that one because we had to go back and be very specific on what areas of Cherry Creek. Again, the challenge is whether or not media channels like CBC report correctly. And if they don't, how much time we put into chasing them to correct versus keeping up with the emergency. And it is a fine balance. But I do recall that one, and I do recall the corrections that pursued or ensued. With regard to Buoyant Alert, it's really important, and you're not the only one who's expressed the fact that they felt they should have received an alert, didn't receive an alert. And I know for us in a debrief, some sort of tutorial on how to make sure you're setting up your Buoyant Alert correctly is really important. You need to identify a marker, right? And of where you are, because if you're in that area, you get the alert. So for example, my work phone has a marker for Tofino as well as over here. So I get all the Tofino Ucluelet alerts. Well, Ucluelet isn't on the same system, but the Tofino alerts in that area still come through. But it's really important that you set up, when you download the system and set it up, that you do more than just have your own address. You put your areas of interest, right? And so one of the features of it is if your children are in school, right, and the school may be outside of where the area where your home is, but you can put a marker on the school as well, because people you care for are there. So if there's an alert that impacts the school, the system will notify you based on your markers. And then the mental health is a big one. I completely agree. And when and how it kicks in is one that certainly we can take a close look at. Last but not least is, and I think pertinent to the communications plan, is the desire to take a look at what more we can do for the coordination of the elected official communications, right? So the way we're structured, we're working with the chair and the mayor typically around communications. Where there is a serious gap is with everyone else, as you're identifying, right? Like, you received information at the same time as everyone else. So we made sure that when we were doing the Facebook updates, that it was staged. Like, we sent it off to the board, and then within the minute it's up on Facebook. We were doing our best to have all this staggering, so they release. But ultimately, our elected officials received what was going out just ahead of it going up on social media and other channels, right? To then coordinate and break that down to area specific is something that would be interesting to explore. And I would propose that we look at it in terms of having, I'll use the chair as an example. So I'm communicating with the chair to put something out. Does the vice chair then also take part in that? And his or her role would then be the internal with the board dialogue to make sure that messaging and any questions that come out of it can be received in a structured way. So you do have an outlet, and it is a plug into the EOC, is a question that I would have.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we have Mayor Minions. Would you like to?
Thank you very much. I just a couple of quick comments. Firstly, I think, the comment that the EOC is working with the chair and the mayor, my experience has been that as we go into media interviews, we receive the update like shortly before, right? Because things are changing very quickly in these situations. So I would actually put the chair and the mayor in a very similar position to the rest of the board, where we're often waiting for information as well. And so I want to, recognize for the directors and councillors that is a stressful position to be in. But I think it's the nature of these emergencies changing so quickly, and wanting to ensure that information is as accurate and correct as possible, and getting it updated so many times a day, and getting it out to everyone. So I think my first sort of thought and comment is, I don't actually think that the chair and the mayor with the exception of the one situation where we had to issue the state of local emergencies. I don't think that there were any other pieces of the Mount Underwood fire specifically where I got information, early or that the board didn't. I got information as we were going into interviews, and although that's challenging, I understand that it's challenging to put accurate and correct information together and get it out and make sure that it is accurate and correct. So I think it's just the nature of how quickly these things change. I think that the one gap that's been identified here that I think is a really important one is the gap when something is specifically happening in your area. And, Mike, I think that like for Cherry Creek to have been being talked about and you not to have a direct, call, whether that be from the EOC or from, the chair or myself or, whoever potentially additionally is getting information. I think that's a really important step that needs to be recognized here. So if there is something specific to your area, then you need a phone call because you have to be able to have an opportunity to ask your questions. And so maybe that's something that, we intentionally add into the plan where there's sort of a designate for connecting with people, with directors who there is something directly in their area. And everyone else, unfortunately, as challenging and frustrating as it is, I think needs to accept waiting on the regular updates. Those updates are frequent and thorough. And while we don't want to be waiting for information, the reality is it's more important to handle the emergency than to be constantly communicating with elected officials. And I know from my own experience being in a lot of these emergency situations over the years that when we do have just a huge amount of questions from elected officials, it can really take away from the response that needs to be happening. So I know getting information out is really important, but I think that especially in the last wildfire, the EOC did an incredible job of getting information out, getting it out extremely quickly, getting it out regularly, like multiple updates a day. And I think honestly, like aside from an intentional and specific call to the EOC director, to the electoral area director whose area might be impacted in a new way every time that happens. I personally don't think that there's anything additional that needs to or should happen. And I think it's just sort of the discomfort of being an elected official and wishing we had all of the answers, but not being in operations. And yeah, so that's just my opinions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Is it possible to have one alert with an address? So I would have an address somewhere that you could just, when you do it to my area, you do it to me too. So I know what's happening in my elected area. I know you said you had to be in a certain area, but could you just make up any blatant address? You can make it work. So Bob would have an address and have a different address. So you say, okay, this is going to go to the area director, and you can hit him that way. And then that way you'd be updating at the same time. Is that possible?
So there's many ways. We could have an area director or an elected official distribution list set up. So any messaging, we can just do a rapid out to that group. So that is one thing. But again, like the other element is that if you flag, let's just say the Cherry Creek Community Hall, then anything in that area as well will go to your phone because you flagged it as a priority area. So there's many ways we can set it up, and so the question then becomes what's the best way of setting it up.
Thank you. True for that, but then I'd have to know where the area is, where it was sent to put my address in to get the alert, which is a problem I have. That means you have to wait till social media kicks in to complain, to put your address in to see what was sent. See what I'm saying?
No, I'm not quite following, because if you flag an area, like I even though when I was working here and my kids are at KSS, or they were in high school, on the Voyant alert system on that side of the island, I have that school flagged, and so any alerts that are issued in Qualicum Beach for that particular area, I would receive on my phone. as well. So if you flag it, one area doesn't trump another, it would come up as what area is impacted. So when I get the Tofino monthly updates, just like our first Wednesday of the month for the tsunami, it says which area it's for and that it's a test, right? So a test for the Tofino area or a test for Port Alberni. So I'm not sure I'm following why you couldn't flag a specific spot. Yeah. Am I
Maybe I'll
Karen,
reach,
do you have a different?
I can add to that. Sometimes on Going to Alert, we have an all regions alert, so it's all area, and it would go out to everybody in our region. So there's that way. Typically, when you have something like an evacuation order, it's attached to a map that we've outlined that affects these properties. And so if your your location pin is in that property, then you're going to hear that. Usually we have a bit of a layered approach where we've got a tighter map that says this is affecting you, you're having to do an evacuation order. And then there's a bit of a broader circle around that tries to let the broader community know that neighbors are being affected, or just so you know, there's an evacuation order in this area. We have debated whether, and some of the comments that we've heard is part of what you do with Point Alert is to only communicate with the people that are impacted by the emergency, and maybe a broader, so you've got an evacuation order and evacuation alert. So there's kind of two maps, if you will. One of the comments that have come up during Mount Underwood is the community at large just wanting information of what's happening, even though it doesn't necessarily impact their household. So that's something for us to think about. Whether we also want that third layer that just then tells everyone in, say, our ACRD what's happening. But also on the flip side of that, we get people who complain about getting too many Point Alert messages, and then trying to contrast that with people feeling like they're not getting communicated with enough. In your comment around elected officials, we do have an elected officials list on Buoyant Alert where we could send out a Buoyant Alert. We didn't do that with Underwood. It is something that's set up that we could do that. We would just maybe need to discuss when we would utilize that tool, and just recognizing, because we tend to use email as a form, or meetings, or the other forms of communication. So if you were looking to want to implement Buoyant Alert as a communication tool in lieu of email or something, then we could have those discussions. And just recognizing that doing Buoyant Alert, although we're getting pretty good and we train on it every month, they do still take time to get out the door too, and the mapping and the GIS, and then also building the messages too. So I'm not sure, in some ways it would be, it would go right to your phone, so that would be effective. But in some ways, an email can sometimes be quicker getting out the door than a Buoyant Alert to elected officials. Yeah. I'll stop there.
I will do Mike Fox, and I'll go on this side.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a good note that an electoral area director, that it's in your area. That's something that me and Daniel, as in the director's seat, can take to heart, and make sure that we include you in any conversations that are happening, because again, Buoyant Alert is a tool, but you should be updated more regularly. So I'll take your point to heart, whether or not it is in the plan or not. I think it is a good reminder to make sure that the person's area is affected, that you're kept up to date when we're able to give those updates. So thanks for those comments.
Just to add and echo that, one of the things we chatted about in this Underwood fires, it is hard to communicate with everybody, especially at the EOC director level, because there's a lot of folks to communicate. And it was discussed to have a policy liaison, and it is mentioned in the plan, and it has been flagged by both Daniel and Mike that would be a good role. Somebody working in step with the EOC director, but then specifically with the role of communicating out to elected officials. So that is something that's integrated and acknowledged in the plan, and also acknowledged from our experience. So it is recognized there, and then I think we can improve that even better with what Mike was suggesting as well.
Okay, thank you. No more on this side. I would direct us over first should have had a long time with then Director Cody.
There used to be a fan out for elected officials, like we'd receive a call or something to just to let everybody know there was an emergency, just putting it out there. And then also it's interesting because Cherry Creek, I actually had calls from Cherry Creek. I don't know, I'm supposed to evacuate. And I went, Cherry Creek, it's not even close to where you are, you know, like, and then somebody said it's on the borderline of Cherry Creek after we figured out, oh yeah, Cherry Creek has another area. I'm on the borderline. Am I supposed to? They didn't understand. Do they leave now or? But it was not a leave now. You know, you're standing by. So I think that terminology needs to be a little more clear for people. What does that mean? You know, and some people were panicking. They called. Sorry, Mike. They called me because they knew me. That was and I don't know if I text Mike about it, you know, or somebody or Shari, I can't remember. Anyways, so I think that has to be really clear. And yeah, I just wanted to explain, you know, how people were reacting and seeing it online too when Cherry Creek's being evacuated and people were panicking online and I'm going, they are, you know, because I hadn't heard. So that was another thing.
I'll reiterate the fact that yes, I followed protocol and stayed silent, and that was really a bad thing to do. So I won't do that mistake twice. Do you have something to comment about this? Then we'll go direct.
I think you raise a really good important message around the way we send messages and we get accustomed to our own jargon or terminology, but it's really important to define that for folks. We have been working as part of this project with somebody who's building graphics, and one of the graphics that we're trying to build is, you know, an emergency alert means this, this, and this, and these are the actions you take. And versus an alert or an order would mean this, this, and this. So I'm really happy to hear you say that because that is something we're actually doing as part of this plan. But I think we can build those systems in even deeper and tighter. And when we're putting out Facebook, if we're going to say something like we're putting out an evacuation order for, we also need to say, and that means A, B, and C. So I really appreciate those comments, and I think we can execute that.
Okay, thank you. Director Cody, thank you for your patience.
Thank you. So I don't really understand how Buoyant Alert can actually work in some situations when there is no address. Highway 4. If there's a fire there and there's no addresses because it's forestry land or anywhere in my area, it's huge. To find out specific information, it's not going to be a Buoyant Alert. I agree with what's the conversation that's going around here. You know, I feel like directors have no support when it comes to emergencies. Through my own experience, I just have that feeling. With the Dog Mountain fire, there was no support from the regional district. Things have changed. And I'm sure that Director Beckett and Sparrow have had some support. But having the direct contact, and I don't want to email, and I don't want a Buoyant Alert, beep, 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 look this up. I would like a phone call directly to the director of the area. I think it's super important so that they feel supported, because people look at us like we have some kind of authority or role to play. And when we don't have any information, when we're not contacted, there is no support for us from this board. So that I really think has to change. And it can't be just Buoyant Alert. Also, I'd like to also say that through the Dog Mountain fire, I made a connection with my fire department. And please don't be doing things that I do, because I was in a situation with no support. I couldn't get any answers. I called the wildfire myself. I got a tour out there by them to see where they were going to shut things off and where crews were going in. Really, really helped me to wrap my head around the whole situation, because I had no information. my husband, I said, go get the fire truck and bring it home. And he did. And he did. And it was parked at the end of the road. And people that were right across from Dog Mountain saw that fire truck. And the next day, the fire department said, get that truck rolling in the community. And that gave the community support. People running out saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because for, 3 days for sure, we had a fire that was right across from us and we watched it. And luckily they did put that out, but 450 acres of burning right in front of your face is pretty dramatic with no information. So like I say, I think things have changed a lot since that fire. But because of those circumstances, I went out of, like, I was doing things that I shouldn't be doing. And I realized that, but it helped my community. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Do you want to speak? Go ahead.
Thank you. I do have a few things I want to address. First of all, the plan is predicated on cascading information where feasible to elected officials first. That is a core principle of the plan. And in my experience, it is best practice in emergency communications. Now, I will qualify that and say it's not always feasible. And you have to prioritize life safety and getting information out to the people who need it in order to make decisions about their safety and their family's safety first. So that has to take precedence. And so that's one factor. But where possible, information should go out to elected officials first, in my view, before an alert is issued, where that can be accomplished in a timely fashion. I also want to pick up on something Daniel mentioned, which is resources and capacity of the information officer function. That is extremely important. And that is very true. If you're getting inundated with internal requests for information from elected officials, it takes you away in the information officer role of doing your primary function, which is communicating with the public. That said, we have seen in other jurisdictions acknowledgement that is an issue, and either an assistant information officer is designed to carry out that function, or as Daniel mentioned, we have built into the plan the opportunity, if you wish, to activate a liaison role that would work closely with whoever is in that EOC director or CAO seat, so that they have support, and that frees up the information officer. And obviously the connection has to be very close between the two functions, but it is very helpful. It's also a good opportunity to get information in, because you do know your communities, you are out with your constituents. They do know you, they're calling you, as you said, or texting you, and you can help identify critical information. Is figuring out what the channels are to effectively get that information to who needs to know in the EOC structure to respond either with information or to address inaccuracies. The other comment I would make is around training. Let's not, when we talk about training, we also have to remember training for elected officials, and that is a good construct to build into your planning, so that at whatever juncture is appropriate for your structure, whether that be annually or at election time when you have new incumbents into their roles, conducting a training. What can you expect? How will we communicate with you during an emergency? And what has our experience been? So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Sola.
Now that you brought up training. Okay, so Penny, I'm sure you concur with this. We've been on council, I've been on council since for 21 years, let's just go with that. And there was no training when I came in, and was no training. The only training I got was I was part of the EOC when it came of the emergency committee and everything. So they had Justice Institute courses. right? And I took them all except for the finance one. I didn't finish the finance at that time. But I took all, that was my training, and I sat in on any events that they staged and everything like that. So that was an amazing moment in time, right? Just to have that training, to see how it runs, and none of the council has ever had any real training. So I'm sure, Penny, you can follow that with the ACRD, because when I was on the ACRD board, there was nothing there too, just whatever was happening. But so I totally agree that there should be. After I took all of the courses with the Justice Institute and was part of any events that we did practice runs, we actually did put a manual out to city council, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't see it. You know, you see it on TV. Whoa. So you brought a really sore subject up on me on that.
Okay, thank you for that. I have Director Boyko.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think training is important and there should be something we could go through, but one suggestion I had is if you have a month or 2 month long EOC activation, send a invite to the electoral area directors that are not involved with the current event. Ask them to come in, sit in the corner for a day at their leisure, and sit there and be quiet and not interfere, but just see what's actually going on. Because we want to see what's happening, how decisions are made, but at the same time, we're going to be asked for future staff increases and decreases and say, oh, well, these guys are all overworked. And if we have some idea on how this is actually happening, we'd be maybe more informed. Plus, when an event happens in our electoral area, we'll be more apt to understand what's happening and either be helpful or at the same time stay out of people's way. Second thing I have is talking about notification to electoral area directors. I think it's important, but at the same time, what are we going to do with it? You're going to post something on Facebook and say, oh my God, something changed in ACRD. And there's only so many times you can post something and relay a message and re-share it or whatever you want to call it, until it comes to a point of, there's not even a point of doing that. Put the link to the ACRD most current thing, because as soon as you post something, it's obsolete. Because if it changes in 5 minutes, all you're doing is wasting people's time. So having the link to the ACRD emergency thing, as long as that's kept updated, and if it changes when every other provincial management thing changes, that's the most accurate, and just keep pointing people at that link. But re-sharing something that says the road's open, and then 10 minutes later, it's obsolete. Like I found that I just stopped. Like there's no point. So making sure the link is good is best. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Daniel, and then.
Just want to follow up on a couple of things. So the training, it's important to remember that we have had training, and this group has had training right in this very room. And so I do recall some of the discussions and training. And at the time, we had just had the windstorms, and we had discussions about the response that we had in the around the windstorms. And so we do periodic training with the elected group. I just also want to say about notification, because as a matter of practice, I do, and I have. So when we were activated, I called John Jack, I called Bob Beckett, I called Mike Sparrow, I had the same conversation saying, this is what we're doing, this is what we're ramping up. If you need anything, this is where I am, and this is where we're on. And so I do get concerns when you say, like, I did it this way last time, and this next time we're going to do it different. What I would ask is that, we follow the plan. And if there's a problem with the plan, then let's adjust the plan. But I don't think a knee-jerk reaction is the best way forward. Like, everyone used the call I made differently, right? And so with Bob, he called back. We didn't have subsequent one-on-one discussions. John Jack called back, and we ended up having different discussions. Now, again, the plan speaks to something different now, but in the moment when you're running the EOC, as a matter of practice, I do, and I have checked in with the appropriate directors. I don't necessarily follow up beyond that if I think the messaging going out to everyone through the EOC is consistent and applicable to those that are there. And I think that the challenge when you're in the EOC director role is that you're trying to get the system to respond to the largest amount of people possible, and where there's some one-on-one need when they're identified, we do our best to follow up. But you know, going like above and beyond that, I didn't. I don't think Mike did, or Scott, as the case was for EOC directors. But I'd like to think that as the elected officials, that you had that link back in and felt comfortable enough reaching back out if you did have concerns. And so that's the way we ran this one. Now, the plan that is in front of us creates nuances on that, and hopefully the plan is good and we can execute the plan, not follow the ICS model. And that's my concern is when you say, well, next time I'm going to be different. I guess my concern is that I don't know what that different is, and if it's inside or outside the plan. But I also feel that at the end of the day, if this was not a good experience because of the interaction with the EOC, then I would ask why wouldn't you have reached out to me?
You're right. I didn't phone. I emailed. Just, you know, Bob.
Thank you. I just want to be clear that my experience with ACRD staff and the EOC was very positive throughout this whole thing. The experience wasn't positive. I don't think it was positive for anybody in the Bamfield, Anakla area. But when I mentioned even this morning about communications, you know, how important that is. And then now, when again, today I talked about some frustrations with communications, it wasn't with staff or the EOC. It was with other agencies, and Daniel's already alluded to it, where there's a bit of a disconnect, or you couldn't, because it was so layered, couldn't get confirmation. And I have to tell you, there was one day recognizing that, like staff, I was getting tired from trying to, look after the community. The breaking point was getting beat up constantly. I was afraid to leave the house at times, but getting beat up constantly. And then thinking we are just getting over some communication glitches, and someone calls and says, well, CBC's reporting. How come you haven't shared it with us? It was either the social media stuff that we've already talked about, or the fact that Ministry of Transportation released something without it going through the EOC. All of those type of things. But I just want to say that my experience with staff was very, very good throughout the whole event.
Yes,
if I may add to that through the chair, thank you. I would just echo, we've done this type of work in a number of jurisdictions across the country, and you have a very capable and qualified emergency management program and staff, and a high degree of collaboration amongst partners and staff. So I think you can give yourself props for that, and also a desire to continue to embark on the continuous improvement cycle of emergency management, which it's hard to do. In my interactions with the team here, I will say that has always been their approach, is to learn from observations, experience, and to incorporate that into best practices for the region. So I think you're on a very good track and in very capable hands.
Okay, thank you for that. Bob, follow up?
Yeah, I wasn't thinking that we were going to be critiquing this event or other events, and cognizant of everyone's time. I think I am, as a director sitting around the board. I am very pleased with the process that we've made as a board and as staff, as you know, with respect to contracting you folks out and moving forward. And I think that we just need to get behind that and continue to move that forward. And at some point in time in the near future, maybe have a presentation to the entire board on lessons learned. And let's just keep moving forward.
Thank you for that. Any more questions? Director Cote.
Thank you. So, as part of this, I'm wondering if the communications process could include a list for the directors, because I don't have anything at home. Who to call? I don't have this information in a cheat sheet. Who's the proper person to call for the EAOC to give update if they see something? Who is the person, you know, with Ministry of Transportation? Who should we be sending them to? So I think that would be really valuable. And having the message, short form sent out, that goes out to everybody. This is what directors should be able to say. There's a lot of non-property or non-resident property owners that call their director thinking that, or email and thinking that we're the contact. So if we had that information that we could pass on, I think it would eliminate a lot of the, like even the link or whatever, like have that information so that we know where to direct people, because they're looking to us for that information. They think that we can supply that. So that would be really nice. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And now I have Mike.
Yeah, thanks for those comments. I really would echo what Director Boyko said on that. I think on every communication we sent out to elected officials, told people to go to our website, to the emergency website that had the most up-to-date information. Individual, I know that me and Daniel did discuss about individual directors or counselors, that we should be getting that as a CAO, not in the director role, but again, my counsel did text me, and I did try and communicate back. I think we can do better as directors when we're in the EOCs. But again, if public are reaching out, I would put them to the EOC page. That's where you're going to find the contacts for MOT that they've given us, and other contacts. I wouldn't. There again, it is the communications for MOT on this one. Also Mosaic. There were so many people involved that to try and give out the individual contacts for the organization would be hard, and they were also shifting quite rapidly as well. So that's just a comment I would tell them to do.
Director Cote.
So there's one issue. A lot of the people that live in my area are senior, or they're visiting, and they don't have the links. They don't have the information. They don't have a computer with them. They're listening to the local radio. So I believe that I don't care how many times a day they update. I think that needs to continue on an ongoing basis. If people are tired of listening to it, turn it off. But there's people out there that need that, that use that continuous updates, and I would totally support that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that, Director Soul.
Just a quick positive here. Amazing communication. You know, like when I think of communication and I think of the COVID, you know, you knew at this time they're going to make some kind of remark of what's happening, and then another update later. And I found that happened a bit with this fire too. You knew, okay, at this time there was going to be an announcement, and I heard it on the radio too. You know, the radio says, okay, we're supposed to know at whatever time it was, and I thought, okay, that works. And so everybody, it's almost like we become trained if the fire is ongoing or whatever emergency it is, you know you're going to go for that. And how many people were glued to know about the update on COVID, you know, on TV or on the radio, wherever they heard their message. So I just want to say there was some positive, and are we there yet? Probably not, but it's a great start. So I'll give you that.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Karen.
I just wanted to circle back and provide some clarification on a couple of matters. Director Cote, you talked about if something happened on Highway 4, how would we know because your location pin isn't on Highway 4? When we do a Voint alert, we can determine what map we're going to use. And so if we do an all regions map, wherever your pin is within the ACRD, you will receive the message. So if something happened in Cathedral Grove and we wanted to make sure all of the ACRD knew that something was happening there, we do have that ability to do that. And it would go wherever your pin is in all of our regions. So just wanted to provide that comfort that that is an option. And then Councillor Solda, you chatted about training, and I just wanted to let you know that one of the things we're working on is creating an emergency policy group book and manual that will provide some of that guidance. And so that will buffer some of the training. And that came out of actually the training session that we did have here. That was actually one of the outcomes that we were trying to implement. And I have it half built and it is something that's on my radar, and we'll be trying to get it across the finish line, and then I'll be bringing that back to this group and we can go over some training then too as well.
Just so you know, there was one written after, you know, I can't remember when, it's through those years, right?
Yeah.
And that was given to all of us counselors, received one.
Perfect. Maybe I don't have to start from scratch.
Oh, just one last thing. We're making assumptions that people have internet, that people have the ability to receive the notification. At where I live, there is no cellular coverage. If I leave my phone on or my laptop, it dies searching for signals. So yeah, I can't. It's unreliable. Is what I'm saying. Thanks.
And I can provide a few statistics just to help looking at some of the platforms that we used. And just for your knowledge, our emergency program Facebook page had about 3,500 followers prior to this summer. We now have over 10,000 followers. So over the course, I mean, that's one of the good positive outcomes, I suppose, of an emergency. But we did get a lot more followers, which it's not everybody, you're right. It doesn't capture everybody. But I did look at some of the analytics, and it does capture actually a high volume of adults and seniors as far as the percentage. Who it doesn't actually capture is the young folks. It was only 2% was catching the 18 to 24-year-olds. But senior 65 plus with 18% was on there. It is capturing a large demographic, which is great. And then Voint Alert in June, before all of this, we had 5,000 users, and it went up to 12,000 over the course of the summer. So quite significant jumps on our platforms, which is good because the message of the public hearing is these are the official sources of truth, and to come back to these areas. And I think that that's a positive outcome from this. And I also just wanted to make a comment around how do you get into the EOC. We do have role-specific EOC emails. And one of the things that I know my staff who've been removed from their day job into the EOC is we flip from really being able to monitor our typical daily email addresses, and we focus on our EOC addresses. So I know for myself, it was hard to keep up with the volume of emails. And so while I was in the EOC, I was solely focused on my role in the EOC and that email address. And so an email might have missed a typical email that would normally be monitored as you're absorbed in the EOC role. So as elected officials, the EOC connection for you would be the EOC director email address. And that's something we can provide to create that link into the EOC. But it would be hard for folks to monitor their usual email addresses in addition to all the EOC addresses. And those role-specific emails are all set up already, and we just activate them while we're in an emergency.
Okay, thank you. As a little tidbit, in my neighborhood, I'm on the youth side of the curve still. Yeah, let that sink in for a sec. Okay, any more questions? No? Well, pretty good for a 10-minute presentation. And that was item 5, presentation A. I'll turn over to correspondence action. We don't have any. Request for decision, emergency communication and public notification plan. Director Beckett.
I would move that motion that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Emergency Executive Committee recommend that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors support the receipt and implementation of the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Emergency Communication and Public Notification Plan as presented.
Seconded by Director Sola. Thank you, Director Sola. Okay, any more comments? I do have one. That fact is we spoke a lot about deficiencies and areas of improvement. If we authorize this plan, are they going to be put into the plan, or should we wait and put them in front of the plan and then authorize the plan? What would be the best direction?
I think the direction here is that we'd be integrating it into the existing plan. So we'd start implementing, and that implementation would be through the integration with our existing plan. It becomes the new communication section. We update that and off we go. If the board ends up supporting it.
Okay, make sure, I don't want to go through what I went through again because I won't go down the same path twice. Any more comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. We have no reports. We have no late business. We have question period. Way over there.
Thank you. There are no questions on Zoom or in the email.
Thank you. No questions. Item 11.
I have a question.
Yes.
So this will go to the board at the next meeting. And we'll have a discussion with the full board.
Yep. So the plan goes forward to the board with the recommendation from the executive committee, and then the board will discuss as it sees fit.
Okay.
Off you go from there.
Will there be a chance for the First Nations and the West Coast to see this document before, like sort of right away, so they can see it and read it and understand it and see if it will work with their plans?
So the First Nations that we did partner with have their plan as well, and they're aware of ours. They've received a copy of ours. It was all part of the process. And so Tishat and Hukachesit, they have their own plans. They're similar bones. Obviously that was the basis of the collaboration, but then tailored specific to their structured and their structures and based on their feedback. Now, what we have not done with these plans is coordinate with Lokwe to house it and whatnot. That wasn't part of the scope of this work.
If there's any feedback from the other partners, that'll come forward at the board meeting then?
I should imagine that if there's any further changes, because it's already been presented to, like this isn't John and Winna's first presentation. As we were working through this, Tishat Council has seen it and provided feedback. They're receiving it again, I think, tomorrow. And so we're not expecting any drastic changes given the amount of dialogue that has taken place. If there are substantive changes that impact ours, then we'd bring that back and inform the board. But beyond that, I think we're pretty much, this is pretty much it. We've done all of our group discussions, one-on-one discussions, chief and council, board. So I think we've covered the basis of those exchanges.
Director Siga, you have your hand up? Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, good. I'm just not clear. So Ahousaht and Sloquet and they would have received copies of our plan and had an opportunity for input. Is that as well as the other like Tofino and Ucluelet, right?
Through the chair, no. So this work was specifically with the city, Tishat, and Hupachesset. And so we did not have West Coast discussions, primarily because we're not structured in the same way with them. So if you'll recall, right at the beginning of your term, one of the things that we ended up removing is that we explored doing a joint service for EOC with Tofino, with Ucluelet, and with the nations, and that ultimately did not go anywhere, and the decision was that everyone would have their own. And so even though we would collaborate, everyone has their own structure. Now that's different from, in this case, the reason why we applied for this grant with this group is we're already formally structured with the city, but then Tishat and Hupachesset did want to collaborate while not giving up their autonomy. And so this is why it was structured this way. So the group of willing partners in the Valley is, and I should say in Banfield, with Huu-ay-aht is the group that's part of this. And so the others would not have received it, and that will be subject to, once it's received and approved, then we will, through our emergency programs, share our updated plans. So that's something that is done, but it's not a preemptive consultation.
Are you good with that answer?
Yeah, through the chair to Daniel then again. So I'm just like, in the case of an incident on the West Coast, who would I be communicating with? Would it be the emergency services out of Ucluelet or Tofino? Or like in the case of a Housat, I don't have any connections there. So yeah, it kind of puts me in a bit of a difficult spot, not knowing exactly who I'm to be communicating with.
So in those cases, we would be formally having discussions. So if there's an activation in Area C closer to Ucluelet, we'd be collaborating with Ucluelet. We'd likely be asking if they need any support from our team, if they want a structure to have anyone from our team there, and we'd be collaborating with them. But we do have agreements with Ucluelet and our work there, and the same thing would go for Tofino. And if you'll recall, again, back to those windstorms that we had, we were in communication with each one of those active EOCs, just monitoring the situation, supporting one another. So that doesn't change. So the communication aspect of us checking in, offering support in whatever way we can within our means, that doesn't change. The details of this plan is really structuring how it is that we internally are going to be prioritizing our communications, and that of course spills forward in terms of where we are the lead. This is how we're going to be putting out our communications. But what we've seen quite often on the West Coast is we're not the lead. We tend to be more of a support agency, and Tofino and Ucluelet tend to have their EOCs in a lead role. Doesn't mean we won't collaborate, but that was an overt decision of the board not to pursue a joint structured EOC on the West Coast.
Just one more question through the chair. So instinctively, what I would do is reach out to Mark Fortune, because he would be on the ground here and in contact with the emergency services, I'm assuming. Would that be appropriate or inappropriate?
Depending on the emergency and the structure, it may be appropriate or inappropriate. So Mark is our staff. He's also part of the Ucluelet Fire Department. My general response to that is, if Mark does not feel equipped to be able to answer you, he'll likely redirect you to me, and that's okay. And so at the end of the day, I think this is the thing to remember around emergencies, is that it's okay to call who you know. And at the end of the day, that person, those people ought to be hopefully in a position to either help answer or redirect so that we can quickly find the structure that works. And I like your question because it does come back to this planning structure where in our communication structure here, there's a clear plan on how we're going to structure things. And so the more we train and the more we understand, the more we stick to a plan, the easier it is for anyone who's part of that plan to very quickly guide somebody to the right place where they ought to be. And it just helps all of us navigate in the most effective way possible. I'm cognizant not to say efficient because like we've had a lot of efficient versus effective debates of late, and I'd rather first target being effective, and once we agree that we're effective, then we can talk about fine tuning for efficiency. But the act of effectiveness is still something that takes a lot of planning, a lot of structure, a lot of feedback, communication, and a lot of trial and error, because our communities are growing and changing as well. And so it's not like it's a singular point that is really easy to hit. Every emergency has its own flair, its own nuance, its own hiccup that will throw the best made plans out for a curveball. And it's up to us through training to be able to take feedback and recover and get back on our feet as quickly as possible in order to serve the public. And that is just the reality of emergency response. Train, execute, adapt, and hope no one got hurt and that no major infrastructure was lost.
Thank you.
Over to Karen now.
Well, I just wanted to provide some more context. Myself and my counterparts on the West Coast meet monthly to communicate and stay connected. We're always talking about where we can align with grant projects or different things that we can do. Specifically around communications, Tofino as well has a new communications plan actually built by Lynn and John as well. So there's a lot of synergies across our region. Even though we had different grants, we actually made sure that we were talking to each other and being aligned as well. And the other piece, and I feel like, you know, we just keep strengthening connections and relationships as we move along. But the other thing we've been working a lot on is our cultural safety plan. And that's also strengthening relationships between and across jurisdictions. And again, it's meeting with colleagues of mine within the nations as well. So we're all becoming very familiar with each other and our plans. We share a lot of our materials so that we're not starting from scratch and that we're seeing where they connect. As part of the cultural safety plan, we're looking at existing plans and we're sharing that information so that we know where the gaps are and where we do have plans, and where there are plans existing, we're making sure that we understand each other's plans so we can respect each other's jurisdictions. And so when I think about the West Coast, there would be very fast connections with our friends on the West Coast to try to connect and make sure that we're all moving in step, as we did, or we tried to do with Underwood as well. So those are all the things that happen regularly, weekly, monthly. As we look at grants, we do try to align where we can. And we are consciously making efforts to build relationships all the time and strengthening that, because I'm a firm believer that in an emergency, it's really comes down to relationships to get out of the gates quickly. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Daniel.
I can just add one thing. It's just like a thank you to Lynn and John and the Adrian Brown Group. Like it wasn't an easy project, and so I just want to acknowledge their work, because there was a lot of check-ins, a lot of one-on-ones, a lot of dialogues, a lot of pivoting as we came across things that we liked or didn't like, and I really feel that the end product is something that we can use and easily integrate. And so I just want to thank the both of you for your work on this, because it's deserving of recognition. So thank you.
I'll make. Oh, you want to go ahead? Go ahead.
I'm just going to acknowledge through the chair our gratefulness for your collaboration and openness, And we have seen a high degree of cooperation and collaboration across the entire region. And when I say region, I mean the broader, smaller region. So I thank you for that. And it's truly been a pleasure.
Thank you. Maybe I'll make the last comment before we adjourn. So I want to make my comment about the communications and the receiver. You probably assumed the receiver was the general public. But I was the receiver. I was not getting information. So it's not the general public, it's the layers in between that you also have to fill in too, and that was also missed. So there are gaps, but you have to understand there's levels of gaps too. We have to look at. So thank you. Oh, Karen, we're not going yet.
I just wanted to provide some confidence that there are standard operating procedures in addition to this and resource guides that help give us the direction around speaking to elected officials and when, and to provide those procedures and processes. And it's not outlined in the plan, but it is been worked on as well. And so there are 11 standard operating procedures and 4 resource guides that provide us guidance and procedural steps to take during emergencies. And I just wanted to acknowledge that work that's been done that might help actually provide the guidance that you're looking for.
All right. Oh, got to see you. Let's keep going.
No, I just wanted to make one final comment. I am aware of all of the collaboration that Karen is carrying with the West Coast, and so I'm very comfortable with the work that's been done, and I think the plan is excellent, and just thanks a lot for the work. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Been a motion to adjourn. Any seconder for that motion? All those in favor? All right. Thank you for your time and effort. Have a good afternoon.